Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. You join us this hour as a preliminary report into the Air India crash that killed 260 people in Ahmedabad, India, says fuel control switches were moved to cutoff just before impact. Cockpit audio detailed in the report highlights that one pilot asked why the fuel was shut off, but the other denied doing it. This situation, of course, comes after the devastating crash in Ahmedabad that has seen over 270 people killed, not just those on the flight, but also those living underneath where the plane came to a halt, crashing into a residential area in Ahmedabad. The situation is difficult, of course, for those who have lost loved ones, not just Indian people dying in this devastating situation, but also those in the United Kingdom, also Portuguese nationals, Polish and a Canadian as well. It is a devastating situation, and we will hear more now.
I don't think we should jump into any conclusions on this. I truly believe we have the most wonderful workforce in terms of pilots and the crew in the whole world. I have to appreciate all the efforts the pilots and the crew in this country are putting into the aviation. They are the backbone of this civil aviation. They are the primary resource of civil aviation, and we care for the welfare and the well-being of our pilots also. So let's not jump to any conclusions at this stage. Let us wait for the final report. Justice has to be done. So I know it is a very difficult time for the family members, but from our side, whatever best we can do from the ministry, we are trying to assist in that.
Well, this situation, of course, is a difficult one, and we are joined by a guest to discuss this. Of course, an extremely difficult moment and confusion now over what is going on. This report answering some questions, but also leaving some unanswered. My first question to you is how do you think this report will be received? And do you think that the families and loved ones of those who have lost their lives may still have answers?
You're asking me?
Yes, please.
Well, this report will be received well because it has come out with certain issues, certain findings. It has, for one, said that the other issues which were coming up, like the pilot's seat or contamination of fuel, have not been brought in. They've been cleared. The medical report of the pilot and the co-pilot has been cleared. So what is they are putting? They are actually trying to say that the switch, which the two switches which bring fuel into the engines, were switched off. So that seems to be the one current thinking in the preliminary report. Now, how were they switched off? The pilot and the co-pilot had a discussion which has been recorded in the flight recording machine, the black box, in which one pilot, I don't know whether the senior one or the junior one, asked the other one, have you switched off the switch for the fuel? And the other person says, no, I have not. So now there is the thing that who switched it off? Did it go off automatically? Is it easy to go off automatically? Now, in this context, I have something to say that that we have some evidence that in December 2018, Federal Aviation Authority, they had a special airworthiness bulletin in which they had said about Boeing 737, that the fuel control switch, the locking mechanism of 737, by a bulletin number SAIB-18-33, they say switch could unintentionally move, and Air India And this particular aircraft, the Boeing 787, has a similar type of cockpit. So they have the same switches, and therefore this applies to 787 also. So there was a kind of an advisory. It was not a mandatory thing, it was an advisory issued, and which also applies to the Dreamliners, Boeing 787. And was it a mechanical or a technical failure that the fuel did not go into the engine? It was the switch was switched off, is something to be decided now, to be looked into now in the final report. So I think that is a very major development which the preliminary report comes out with. So that's where I think we have some lead to discuss further. That's it for the time being. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And looking as well at this report, it is, of course, only preliminary. Do you think that there will be any developments in the final report, or do you think this is pretty much a framework of what is to come? And then looking forward and looking at how a devastating situation, a crash like this, which is so rare to happen so soon after liftoff, do you think that any lessons can be learnt from this report, with the mysteries still remaining in place?
Well, I'm sure they can, because they will go through a proper investigation. And the investigation should reveal this, or maybe something new might come up, because it happens that the preliminary report is not the only item. New items come up. So we still have to wait for the final report. But the findings of the preliminary report do point to the switch. It also points to the fact that the two pilots have exchanged talk with each other, saying who has switched off the fuel switch, and both have said, I mean, one has asked, the other said, I have not. So that is a very major consideration of this report, and we have to move forward, and let's see what the new report comes up, the final report comes up with.
Sanat Kaul, I'd like to thank you ever so much for joining us and providing your insights there. We will, of course, continue to bring you all the developments as this preliminary report is sifted through, and then when that final report comes. But we do move on now. And Russian President Vladimir Putin has urged Iranian officials to accept a nuclear agreement that would ban uranium enrichments, this as per reports. Putin has reportedly conveyed his position to both President Donald Trump and Iranian leaders in recent weeks, encouraging Tehran to move towards a deal that would help restart negotiations with Washington. Meanwhile, Tehran has insisted it will not accept any agreement that eliminates its ability to enrich uranium. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi of Iran even said that talks with Washington could resume if the US guarantees no further strikes on nuclear sites and offers compensation. Well, joining us to discuss this is Major General Sudhakar G, who is a senior geopolitical and strategic defence expert. Thank you very much, Major General, for joining us. This report, this announcement that Russia could potentially be urging Iran to agree to zero uranium enrichment comes as a surprise. What's your opinion on this initial report?
Yeah, good evening, Jaswant. Thank you for taking me to your show, and compliments to your viewers. As regards your question, I would say those who have been following the events minutely, they would bear me out that there was something going on between Russia and Iran quietly and discreetly. As such, both the countries, they are signatory to a strategic partnership from 17 January 2025. And it means nothing. It is just a kind of a predominantly economic kind of agreement, although defense forms one of the parts. It's not like a NATO type agreement, but Russia always has had goodwill, overshadowing all other issues. As far as Iran was concerned, Iran is fully aware of the fact that it is between Russia and Iran. They could hold on or extend support to Syria in times of crisis way back in 2011 and 15. And that's how the regime of Syria stayed on till, till the criticality actually emerged in the recent past, wherein Assad had to seek refuge in Russia. But presently, he is on exile. But as far as the enriched uranium is concerned, my take on the whole issue is that in all probability, there is a trilateral, discreet, and very confidential discussion in progress. America and Russia, there have been in dialogue behind the scene in the back door, and Russia's influence on Iran is being exercised to make sure that Iran exercises restraint in enriching the uranium beyond a particular percentage. But having said that, please allow me to dilate the issue that unofficially and informally, in many of the open sources, you would find that the enrichment of uranium in Iran has gone beyond a level which will enable them to produce nuclear bombs. Mindful of the fact the little boy who was dropped in 1945 over Hiroshima had an enrichment percentage of approximately 86.7. And I'm given to understand from my research and academic studies that the certain quantum of uranium of Iran has crossed that particular line, so thereby indicating that Iran has already reached that stage of criticality, and therefore all out effort has to go in internationally to make sure that Iran is made to restrain and exercise restraint and prevent Iran from growing nuclear. So it's a very good situation which is happening, whether doing it straight, catching the ear straight or from behind. I'm very, very happy and delighted to learn that such a move is taking place, which is beneficial to bring peace and normalcy to the strife-torn region of Middle East, and particularly what has recently happened in 12 days war, which was unleashed against Iran by Israel and USA. Back to you, Ashwin.
Yes, absolutely. And Major General, you will be staying with us. We move away from the Middle East now and we move to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Ukrainian officials have claimed that Russia has fired around 620 drones and missiles at its territory overnight, so far killing 4 people. The Ukrainian Air Force said it has downed 319 Shahid Iranian-made drones and 25 missiles, adding that 1 missile and about 20 drones hit 5 locations. Following this, Ukraine has called for fresh sanctions on Moscow to halt its record barrages. Kyiv and Moscow have stepped up aerial strikes over recent months, and the US-led ceasefire talks aimed at pausing the over 3-year war have stalled. Meanwhile, US Special Envoy Keith Kellogg is due on Monday to begin his latest visit to Ukraine as a Washington-led peace effort stalls. Well, thank you, Major General Sudhakar G, for staying with us. The second largest assault on Ukraine by Russia, according to Kyiv, seeing deaths targeting areas not just in the east, of course, where fighting is ongoing, and not just the capital that has seen heightened strikes, but also in the west, close to Europe, and has seen scrambled jets from Poland. Is this a signal at a clear intensification of not just strikes, but of tensions that could, if not checked and if not worked towards with a ceasefire, could spill out and potentially reach other European countries as well?
Absolutely. I tend to agree with the narrative you have given the preamble to this question. I personally feel my take on the whole issue is that the problem of Russia-Ukraine war has to be understood with utmost sincerity. Only then a lasting solution can be found. Those who ignore what happened on 9th February 1990, when James Baker came all the way to Moscow to have one-on-one meeting with Mikhail Gorbachev, and the assurance which was given to Mikhail Gorbachev with regard to unification of East with the West Germany, that is the collapse of the Berlin Wall was being discussed. and with the concern of Mikhail Gorbachev that NATO threat will continue to spread and expand. And to that particular apprehension and the concern of Mikhail Gorbachev, James Baker went on record to say that not an inch of the sphere of influence of NATO would take place to the east of where it is today. That is not only east of Germany, but the entire European frontier. So that is the kind of commitment given. So with that backdrop, at that point in time, if there was a 16 members, the founding members being 12 of them in NATO, and with the disintegration of USSR, if the number of NATO countries have expanded, as on today, they're touching a figure of 32, well, you can well understand the basic factor of trust is taking the beating. If that be the kind of a case, then I'm afraid, and with the flip-flop decisions being taken by the Western alliances, especially USA, at times he says that they will be hold back to the supply of weapons and warlike stores to Ukraine. At times he says they will be supplied, the supply will be resumed, as has happened about a day before. So therefore, under these circumstances, with the increased rate of expenditure of the percentage of GDP of all the European countries, the NATO countries, including UK, to reach a figure of 5% by 2035, and an unhindered supply of heavy weaponry and warlike stores to Ukraine, and with a kind of a spider web operation which was conducted by none other than Ukrainian forces 4,500 kilometers deep inside Russia, and striking off almost about 40 or more strategic bombers. So these are the kinds of criticalities which are being imposed against Putin. For Putin, loss or surrendering this particular conflict in favor of Ukraine or Western alliances is a prohibitive cost which he cannot permit himself as the president of Russia, and therefore he will do anything and everything to continue the conflict so as to have the upper edge and on the over the escalatory matrix, so that he can actually control as much as possible. The war has to end in his terms, and only then there will be lasting peace. I'm not saying that the existing land which has been captured or occupied by Russia will be held by Russia, be it the Crimea or Georgia or along the Donbass and Luhansk area. All I'm saying that's for something to begin with a ceasefire, there has to be a trust restored between the Western alliances and Russia. The war has to end as is where is, and only then the ceasefire has to begin. Some peace talk has to start. For that, I'm given to understand from the open sources that very, very clandestine and discreet activities are taking place behind the scene. A lot of talks are taking place. The US senior representatives, they are already in dialogue, directly or indirectly, to bring this mindless conflict to an end. If it doesn't, then Russia, in my opinion, will carry on, because the defense industry production capability of Russia is 4 to 5 times more than that of the entire Western alliance put together. Take your mind back to Second World War. It has gone beyond that capacity of production of weapon equipments, and also being supported by North Korea and China with the double
Yes, Major General Sudhakar, I apologise to cut you off, but we are unfortunately out of time. But thank you ever so much for joining us and discussing those topics. We, of course, will continue to bring you all of the updates on the front lines and in the air during the Russia-Ukraine conflict. But we now move to North Korea, where Sergei Lavrov, who is Russian foreign minister, has been meeting with the foreign minister of North Korea, but also Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un received the Russian foreign minister warmly aboard his yachts. This visit, confirmed by the Russian foreign ministry, saw Lavrov brief Kim on his discussions with North Korean foreign minister Cho Son-hu earlier in the day. The talks centred around strengthening military cooperation, establishing new transport links and enhancing bilateral economic ties. In a significant development, Pyongyang reaffirmed its strong backing for Russia's ongoing military campaign in Ukraine. According to Lavrov, North Korea expressed firm support for Russia's objectives in the war, with reports indicating the possible deployment of more North Korean troops to the conflict. Well, joining us to discuss this situation and this growing alliance is Dr. Sanjay Kumar, a journalist at the Korean Herald, joining us from Seoul in South Korea. Thank you, Dr. Kumar, for being here with us. We've, of course, just discussed the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict and the forward momentum in terms of strikes that we're seeing from Russia. Also reports of Russia pushing forward on the front lines. We know North Korean troops have been involved in the fighting alongside Russian troops against Ukraine in the Kursk region and elsewhere. How significant is this alliance between Russia and North Korea at a time of global instability and global conflict?
On the war front, the escalations are continuously increasing. It is getting more offensive from both the sides. But if we see this new development of the visit from both the sides and the meeting, we should see it as an extension of the treaty that has been signed last year and the meeting that Putin and Kim Jong-un had last year as well. Few days ago, we were saying that we should not see this as a surprising thing. Yeah, but the numbers had been little different through different sources. But we should look from the perspective of North Korea that what situations they are going through. They have supplied troops, which is not a new thing. It is in the public, but from their perspective, they have some economic ambitions as well. Because of the sanctions in the last few decades, North Koreans had been suffering many kinds of economic issues and the domestic economic issues. But now they also want to start and revive the economy through initiatives like Wonsan Resort. They want to activate people-to-people ties, and in Russia, North Korea, China, when the leadership meets, people-to-people ties also gets activated easily. So we should see Lavrov and Cheson, his meeting from that perspective, and we should not be very surprised if we come to know that this is a kind of working level meeting to bring Kim Jong-un also into Russia in coming years. So we should not take it as surprise. But diplomatic messaging also we have to take care of. Lavrov is coming from the ASEAN summit, like ASEAN forum, and he had been discussing this issue as well. And at the same time, in the East Asian region, Korea, Japan, and US, they have come up with they are doing this air drills as well, with some drills through bombings as well, like involvement of B-52H, then Korean F-16, and then Japan's F-2. So this trilateral cooperation is also sending some kind of message and diplomatic pressure to counter it. And then until tomorrow, Lavrov is going to be in the north, but after that, on Monday, likely he's going to be in China. So this is turning out to be a very geopolitical initiative. We should see in that way.
Yes, Dr. Kumar, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us. We will bring you the rest from Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's visit to North Korea as it happens over the weekend. But we do move on now and we head to the Middle East, specifically looking at Gaza, where Israeli airstrikes have reportedly killed at least 28 Palestinians, including 4 children. This according to hospital officials. The strikes began late on Friday, pounding central and southern Gaza. 13 people, including children and 2 women, were reportedly killed in Deir al-Balah. Meanwhile, 15 were reportedly killed in Khan Yunis. We have some clips to play you from some Gazans living in the enclave talking about the recent strikes.
الواد شهر 7 ومات في شهر 7 5 سنين طبقين خلاص راحت فيه 5 سنين 5 فتحت بطن عشان اجيبه ما يموتش مني قتلوا اليهود الملاعين قتلوا اليهود اخذوا وسحبوا مني برفع حضني العالم مش شايف كيف بموت الناس، اطفال بموتوا. مين اللي بموت؟ مين اللي بموت؟ مقاوم؟ ولاد مقاومين؟ نام عطشانين وجعانين. بستنى الصبح عشان يجيبوا خبز. بطلب صبحين خبز بقول يا ما جعاني بدي اكل. مات ومالوش خبزه، مات ومالوش خبزه. حسبي الله. روح جيب لهم ميه، ابوهم قومني. حسبي الله. قومني عشان اشيل الحمل اللي وراه. لسه في ايتام، اكيد بنتي في العنايه وبنضرتي في العنايه، ما ضلش حدا، اللي مات كل لحيته، عيلتي راحت كل لحيتها، انمسحت عيلتي.
Well, this comes as the Israeli military says that it has hit around 250 targets over a 48-hour period, claiming that this included terrorists, weapon storage facilities and Hamas infrastructure. The war in Gaza, of course, started when Hamas terrorists killed over 1,200 people and abducted 251 hostages in the October 7th attack. This in response to Israel's offensive. And it's killed over 57,000 people. According to Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry, just to bring some context as well, we were reporting earlier today that talks in Doha between Hamas and Israel over a potential ceasefire brokered by Qatar, the US and Egypt are reportedly stalling over key differences. Joining us to discuss that and the latest strikes, Professor Kobi Michael, a senior researcher at the INSS and Misgav Institute, joining us from Israel. Let's first, Professor, look at these talks that are reportedly stalling. How significant is it for both sides in this war that these are resolved swiftly and a ceasefire and hostage release deal can be sorted out?
Good afternoon. I think that we are getting closer to a sort of a ceasefire agreement. We have to remember and to emphasize that this is a partial agreement, not a final status agreement. And as long as we are talking about a partial agreement or let's say a gradual agreement following a Witkoff proposal, I think that the gaps between both sides are bridgeable or close to be bridgeable. They are not bridgeable, the gaps between both sides, when it comes to the final status agreement, which means the end of the war. Okay, but now we are in a very tough neighborhood where Hamas still believes that they can reach some further achievements. Qatar doesn't pressure Hamas the maximum pressure because the US doesn't pressure Qatar the maximum pressure. And I believe that the military pressure is not enough in this regard because Hamas looks at the US and sees a very, I would say, determined president that seeks to reach to an agreement, and they believe that this president will pressure Israel, and therefore they continue pressuring in the negotiation and to remain tough and to refuse to make some further concessions. I think that they are wrong. This is not the first time that they are wrong, and they have misperception with regard to the reality, and they are not alone in this regard. Hezbollah was like that as well. Iran was like that as well. And therefore, I believe that only by combining the political pressure via Qatar and the military pressure, we will be able to reach to the agreement. And anyway, I think that we are talking about a matter of a week or something like that until things will be right.
Yes, and Professor Kobi Michael, just to finish our discussion, of course, further reports of casualties in the Gaza enclave, reports of women and potentially children as well being killed. Of course, the IDF have been strong. Benjamin Netanyahu has been strong on the fact that these military operations will continue until either a ceasefire is agreed or his key aims are accomplished. Those are, of course, hostages being returned, the disarmament and the disbandment of Hamas in Gaza. Do you think that that method, while conversations are ongoing, while discussions are ongoing, do you think civilian casualties are helping in those ceasefire negotiations? Or could there be a different tack that's taken by the IDF at this point to avoid more civilian casualties that are being reported?
Civilian casualties are very unfortunate, and there is no doubt that Israel does the utmost, the IDF does the utmost efforts in order to minimize the collateral damage. Unfortunately, we are at war. War is a very bloody phenomenon, and there are casualties. But on the other hand, I would like to emphasize that whenever it comes to Hamas, we don't have to take Hamas as a very reliable source. We know that Hamas lies, we know that Hamas exaggerates, and we know that Hamas uses civilian and humanitarian facilities for terror purposes. The IDF, as I said before, does best efforts in order to minimize the collateral damage by warning the people, by asking them to leave these areas and the humanitarian compounds or facilities, and uses very accurate weapon, a very precise weapon in order to minimize the collateral damages. I don't know exactly what has happened there because the IDF has not published yet a detailed report in this regard. I think that we have to wait to the IDF report in order to understand what exactly happened there. But let's remember and put in mind that Hamas uses AI and Hamas uses a lot of fake evidence. And I will not be surprised if at the end of the day, we will find out that the numbers are much smaller. And once again, I say that it is very unfortunate, but we are at war, and I think that the main questions and the main allegations must be addressed to Hamas because Hamas could have ended this war long ago.
Professor Kobi Michael, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing that information on a conflict that is continuing as diplomatic efforts also are underway. We will bring you all the updates on both the battlefield and also in diplomacy. But now it's time for the latest from across the world of business. Kraft Heinz is planning to break up, separating its food products, its fast-growing condiments, sauces and spreads. The company, formed from the merger of Kraft Foods and H.J. Heinz, has seen its market value drop by $57 billion since the deal a decade ago. Kraft Heinz is exploring strategic options, a process that began months ago with a potential separation expected in the coming weeks. The company is facing challenges from shifting consumer preferences towards healthier, cheaper alternatives, impacting brands like Kraft's mac and cheese, Oscar Mayer and Heinz ketchup. Kraft shares rose 2.5% following the news. Google has struck a $2.4 billion deal to acquire top AI talent from Windsurf, a coding startup. This includes the hiring of co-founder Varun Mohan and senior R&D staff, along with a non-exclusive license to Windsurf's technology. The move will enhance Google's DeepMind team, focusing on agentic coding and advancing Gemini tech, while Windsurf was previously in talks with OpenAI for a $3 billion acquisition. The deal fell through. This acquisition is part of a broader tech trend, with tech giants like Meta, Amazon and Microsoft also securing AI talent in the race to dominate the field. US customs duties have surpassed $100 billion for the first time in a fiscal year, driven primarily by tariffs imposed on China during the Trump administration's trade war. These duties have become a major revenue source from the US government, but also contribute to higher costs for American consumers and businesses as imported goods become more expensive. While the tariff were initially meant to boost domestic manufacturing, their continued impact is being felt across the economy, raising concerns about long-term effects and trade relations and consumer prices. Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang sold approximately 225,000 shares valued at $36.4 million. This as part of a stock sale plan he initiated in March. Huang aims to unload up to 6 million shares by the end of the year. Meanwhile, his personal net worth has now caught up to Warren Buffett, as reported by Fortune and Bloomberg. The stock sale comes amid Nvidia's significant growth driven by its leadership in AI technology. Well, that's all we have time for, but we will be back with more of your latest breaking world news.